talk to us about autistic burnout. Tell us what it is, like how it presents, all of the things about autistic burnout.
Yeah, so anyone can burn out, autistic or not. So that workplace burnout is actually really common and talked about in the workplace. But with autistic people, there are things that can trigger us to burn out that neurotypicals just don't have on their plates. One of those, especially for me and a lot of other autistic people, being sensory sensitivities and sensory overstimulation and sensory fatigue. And then another one that is a drain on autistic people and is a cause of autistic burnout that neurotypicals don't have would be autistic masking, because that is another slow drain. If you think of it like you've got this health bar in a video game and it's constantly draining, and you've got two things that are slowly draining until you've got nothing left, and you never get enough recharge time to get back up to 100, and so eventually you're just so depleted that you've got no life left, and you're always operating at that minimum. And if we take like a really formal definition, they say mental, emotional, and physical exhaustion that can be accompanied by a loss of skills that some autistic people, and they say some, but I say a lot of autistic people I know experience. And a lot of us, when we look back at what is triggering it, we say it can generally comes from this cumulative effort of that constant drain of having to navigate society and a world and these systems and these offices and these spaces that are not designed for us. They're set up for neurotypical people, and when we try to speak up for our needs, we're dismissed. And looking at autistic burnout, because no autistic person is alike, burnout is going to present differently depending on the autistic individual. I become very sluggish and tired. My brain, I just feel like it's not working at optimal level. It's like I don't have access to all of my brain power anymore. And my housework, my self-care start to slip. I really lose energy to care for myself. I go into this energy protection mode, kind of like a phone or an Apple Watch would do when it's almost out of battery and you have minimal functionality. And I am just keeping up with the bare minimum that is expected of me in day-to-day life. And like I said, I come home from work, I just crash. I have nothing left to give anything good in my life. And if this burnout continues past that point over a long period of time, a lot of autistic people, myself included, who have co-occurring health conditions, like many of us do, will also experience flare-ups in those health conditions. And so I have stomach issues, I have migraines, and I also have a history of seizures, and I can have vertigo and all of these things that will flare up if I let things get bad enough and I get to that point. And so it's like, oh no, it can get really bad. Like I know already, because this has happened to me multiple times in my life. One of the first ones I remember was when I was 11. And I was, in school puking over a trash can because keeping a trash can by my desk was an accommodation because this kid's always sick. We don't know why. They need to be in school. Remote learning wasn't an option back then.
No.
It was as horrible as it sounds, but it's terrible. And I knew, like, if it gets that bad, I'm not going to be able to work. I'm not going to be able to take care of myself. I'm not going to be able to do anything. And it was just scary seeing it deteriorate. So, that's what led me to being diagnosed too, is that burnout where I was starting to get sick again in my late 20s. And I was just like going back to the doctor over and over again, trying to figure out what was going on. And eventually I was referred for a mental health assessment. And that's how we ended up going down the autism direction.
Well, it's funny because a lot of women who are going through that, that's when you might get that autism diagnosis, but there are so many who are getting depression, bipolar, I don't know what else. I don't know all of the things, but I mean, they're getting diagnoses of basically mental health when really it is something, I have no words, but really it's you're autistic and you need to take better care. Not you need to take better care, but you need more accommodations.
Yeah. And the world, you have to really fight to have those, because a lot of times people are like, you don't really need that, or you're just being difficult, or you're being a diva, or you're, they're just like, they're very dismissive.
Yes. Kieran, that's a great point. It's wrapped up in that regression narrative, which is pathologically framed. And that goes back to our discussions about children, because I know that you do a lot of work with adults and that's your forte, but with children, they have that that narrative about regression. And it was Kieran's article that I read that made me think of it a different way, because my kids, they never regressed, and I was always confused about, like, okay, so is it something different happening? But once I read Kieran's article, if somebody wants to post that in the comments, that would be amazing. On regression, I'm sorry, on autistic burnout, I realized that my babies were already in burnout from the NICU, from the trauma that they were experiencing. So they were already in that burnout mode just from the jump. And like it reframed it in such a way that I really understood it. So like when we have kids that are, stressed, or we have adults who are stressed, or, sensory overload. I love your phrase, sensory fatigue. I wrote that down. I love that. They will lose skills because they're not able to work at that peak capacity anymore, because they're fatigued, they're burnt out. I just love I don't know. I'm going off on my own little tangent that I can't even.
Oh yeah, I recognized it immediately when I saw people talking about regression. I was like, this is not regression. I was like, I've been through this. I was like, but when they talk about regression, they're like ignoring the cause completely.
Right.
That there's a cause, there's a trigger, there's something stressful happening that has that autistic person on the brink.
And it's as if, like, as parents, if you see a kid regressing, you want to get in there and fix it, right? Like, I want to fix it. I want to make sure that they're back to peak capacity or whatever. Like, okay, well, they knew how to do this three months ago, so we need to keep doing it. But instead, we need to be taking more care. That's what I learned about burnout. Is
not
that it's
pushing through.
Yeah, not pushing through. We need to, like, fall back and take good care of our children or ourselves or our employees. Yeah.
Yeah. And some autistic people, we have this talent for pushing ourselves past where we should push ourselves. And I'm one of those autistic people. So I speak from experience with this. And, before my diagnosis, I was frequently burning myself. I was always on that edge of burnout. And I tried and failed to hold myself up to the standards of, like, non-autistic people around me. And I didn't understand how much neurodivergent health is different from neurotypical health, and how much the different ways that we process the world can lead us to these burnouts and breakdowns from things that a lot of people can ignore, like we're talking about the lighting and all of that. And it's been a whole process of changing my environment and many pieces of my life, because I've learned so much about myself and the causes of the burnout. And, like, I'm much more likely to speak up for my needs at this point. I'm very bold in speaking up for my needs. I work from home. I've been working from home for a while, since before the pandemic. I was the first employee in that organization to work remote, and they didn't say, we don't do that here. They said, how? And before the pandemic, we were all remote. We had turned in the keys and decided we didn't need a physical office. So, these things are good for everyone. And they're still remote. And we were glad that we had already been remote before everything shut down, because we would have been struggling and behind otherwise, but we were kind of ahead because of it. So it was them accommodating me ended up being good for business,
Right.
I work in a sensory environment, and as I'm aging and I'm becoming older, I'm finding that I'm less tolerant to sensory stimuli and stressors. And so I really do have to limit my exposure to environments that trigger overload and anxiety and stress and other things. And, when I was diagnosed and I failed to have my needs met by one employer, I found a new job that would fully accommodate me as an autistic person. And then since losing that job and now I'm working for myself, I'm benefiting from working less and managing my own schedule and my workload. I have not worked this little because I've always done a full-time job and Neurodivergent Rebel on top of it for the last years since I started. So I haven't worked less than 40 hours a week in a very long time. Actually, probably never, because I started working 40 hours a week as soon as I could. And when I was still in high school, when I was 17, as soon as the law allowed me to. So it's just having that and, being a lone ranger, it's been nice. And actually not working on a team, even though I loved my team, has removed a lot of external expectations and demands and things that I can struggle with if I'm really honest. So all of that, even just working on my own and having even more control, like I feel better than I've felt in so many years. It's amazing. Like I feel like, whereas I just 4 years ago, I was really sick. I was really struggling. I was, just barely surviving. And, I'm actually like making time again for activities that I love, that things that recharge me. I'm keeping my set schedule and I'm making time for friends and loved ones. And I'm turning down work if it doesn't inspire me, even if there's money in it. Like I know now, like my health is worth more than money. Even if we're living slim, sometimes it doesn't matter. And I didn't always know that now. But, I do now, because I know if I don't have my health, there's definitely, like, I really can't work if I get really sick. So
Right.
it's been a journey getting to this point. And it's really been a 4-year journey since I was diagnosed last fall. So the blog, I think, turned 4 the end of September and November, around there. Because I waited, I think, a little bit after I was diagnosed, because I went and Googled things after I finished the first book that was recommended to me. And the Google was gross of what I found when I typed in autism. And I was like,
bad. It is so bad.
Because I had been reading Autistic Voices only. And then I went to Google and I was like, I got to do something. I got to do something. I was like, And so I think, when the name came to me, I went and jumped on it and got it and started 4 years ago in the fall. And it's been a roller coaster.
Nice. Bobby had a question. How do you differentiate between autistic burnout and a flare-up?
Well, I mean, that would depend on what it's a flare-up of, and what health conditions you have. I might have one isolated seizure. The last one I had was an isolated seizure because I had a stressful week and didn't get enough sleep, and then had to be somewhere really, really early in the morning and was anxious about not waking up on time and was anxious all night. And then I had an isolated seizure, that I hadn't had in a year that morning. And I haven't had another one since. And that's been over a year now again. And so that's maybe a little bit of a flare up, but there was still a trigger for that for me. So for me, like a lot of these things are going to be triggered by a lot of things I've removed in my life, that I feel are kind of probably tied to being burnout. Like with my stomach stuff, those things, like maybe if I eat something I shouldn't, I can expect a stomach problem. If there's a cause and effect kind of a thing. So I know what those triggers are. But versus when I'm in burnout, it's constant stomach distress and it doesn't go away. Versus I've got a little flare here. Whereas burnout, for me, I've had periods where burnout can last for months and years. It can be an extended long-term kind of a thing. Yeah. Well, and that's the biggest thing is, see, Bobby says here, is working on the triggers. trying to find out what is triggering things for you. And like burnout comes from having too much stress in your life. And for autistic people, we have to consider sensory stress and other kinds of stressors that other people don't have. We have extra stress because of the neurotypical world. And so we got to remove a lot of that extra stress from our lives to get healthy.
And even when you're working on like something that is your passion, I mean, sometimes you still even have to say, okay, I need to just take some time for myself and not do this. Because especially with the work that you're doing, advocacy work is thankless. I mean, there are great moments in there, but it's like, even when you have a huge win, you're still only moving this much closer to the starting line. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, you have a huge win, but you just know there's like mountains to go. And I think especially for autistic advocates, you just have to take care of you, even though you really, really, really are passionate about what you're doing.
Yeah. And what I've learned about that personally is because I myself am a very all or nothing kind of a person. You know, if we put it in the pathological model, I can be a bit obsessive. And I think that's actually a strength for me. That's a big strength.
Perseverating, right.
But I am so driven that if I don't give myself some very specific rules about when and where and how off time can occur, like I don't work after this certain hour, or I only work this many hours a week, and I can't work this many long nights in a week, or only every now and then if I really need to, but like really making concrete rules, and so that I am forcing myself to turn it off. And that I had to learn that because I was, I would go from one job and then have my phone in my hand and be on Neurodivergent Rebel for the rest of the time, from the time I woke up until the time I went to bed.
Yeah.
And not only was that not healthy, I neglected my relationships and the people in my life. I neglected my self-care a lot of the times. I neglected other responsibilities and other things. And I was burning myself out. So it was not a healthy cycle, but it was just like I had to learn to be able to put it down and turn it off, and learn when you need to just block people, because there's a lot of really ugly, really dark things on the internet, unfortunately.
I struggle with that.
Yeah, and some people really only want to come and they're trying to just get a rise out of you, or maybe they're hurt or they're having a bad day or whatever, but they want to put some hurt on you too. They want you to feel some of that hurt with them, and they'll lash out and try to hurt you, and that doesn't excuse it. It's not okay. And so I'm not a punching bag for you, because you've got something else going on. And I didn't know that either for a lot of years, right? I would just take it because,
right.
That's a whole nother problem. That's a whole nother episode, right?
Right. I know, right? She'll be here all week. Speaking of burnout and overworking yourself, Kieran, didn't you just say that you were about to go? Because you just had a 2-hour thing that you just did. Kieran can't leave us alone. We're friends. Triggers burnout and health conditions across sensory, communication, behavior, movement, all of the things, all of the ways we are marginalized. I'm actually going now.
Be safe. It was good to see you put your face pop up in here.
Yes, seriously. I know it's almost as if like all of that is connected. Like when you're stressed, especially if you have autoimmune issues. My mom has autoimmune issues, and she has had to really de-stress her entire life just to survive right now. I mean, she worked, I don't even know how many hours a week for her whole entire life. And I mean, now she's really having to not have any stress at all in order to just like to still be with us. So I think it's important, especially younger adults, we need to take care.
Stress kills.
Yeah,
we know that already. We know stress is bad for our health. We know prolonged stress is dangerous for your health and is a killer of people, autistic or not. But nobody's talking about how autistic people have these additional sensory stressors or additional trauma and stressors, like, Kieran is saying, and additional stressors of the environment and masking and all of these other things that non-autistic people and neurotypicals aren't dealing with. And so we've just got more stress. I'm going. Ooh.
So a last question about burnout. How can we support our autistic loved ones, our autistic children, our autistic students? How can we support those who are going through burnout?
This is a good one, and this is important. So, I'm going to say that because often executive functioning and self-care are some of the first things that go for a lot of autistic people as we start to burn out, you can consider helping with things like chores and cleaning, or cook your loved one something to eat, bring them a drink, bring them something they like. And really, really importantly is, don't take it personally when they may have to cancel plans last minute, and encourage them to rest. If they feel like they need rest and they're feeling depleted, don't guilt trip them when they say, hey, I really can't, I need to stay and rest. Because a lot of people, you say that and they're like, oh no, come on out, it'll be fun. It's like, no, I need to take care of myself, I need to rest. But they don't understand being at that point where you need to rest. And, think about what you would want, or what anyone would want, if they were feeling physically and emotionally exhausted, or if they weren't feeling well, if they were feeling sick and they're not feeling their best. Have compassion, love, respect, and don't be judgmental of someone, because it's kind of hard to exist when you're in burnout.
And there's no time limit either. It's like, oh, well, you've been like this for whatever, 2 months, when are you gonna stop being like this? And well, that's not gonna help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I don't know. I feel, like just giving yourself grace, giving your loved ones grace.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is, grace, and trying to understand, even if you don't really understand. So they're telling you they're struggling, they're telling you something's difficult, they're telling you they're exhausted and they're tired. Okay, even if you don't understand where that's coming from, this is that person's reality. So, okay, how can you support them? Because your best changes from day to day, and when you're burnt out, it's already horrible because you feel like you can't do your best, and that sucks, because you're like, I know I'm capable of so much more than I can do right now, and that is so frustrating. And it's like, they already know that they're not at their best. Like, don't make it worse.
Yeah, we don't need any additional reminders on that.
Yeah.
My mom said, I used to think that I could do anything if I wanted to, and that if something needed doing, just do it. I agree that autistics have stress applied on top of everything else. And that is literally how she lived her life. She would just do everything and do all of the things. And, that takes a toll. That takes a toll.
Yeah. And I did that for a lot of years. And I got to a point where I couldn't keep up anymore with that pace. I guess I'm in my early 30s. I'm not that old, but it did start to catch up with me earlier than I thought it would catch up to me.
Boundaries are so important.
Mm-hmm.
That is such an important thing to work on, is boundaries. If you don't work on anything else.
And I didn't have any when I was diagnosed, I realized. I had to rebuild that too.
That really, like, if anything, that really does help with, like, okay, this is not a me problem. Mm-hmm. Or like, okay, I cannot deal with that. I'm going to put this over here. Like, boundaries are so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're hard. And like when you're diagnosed, you may have to like learn all over again, because a lot of us we've let other people violate our boundaries, because people are like, oh, it's not that bad. It's not that bright. You don't really need to rest. And people dismiss you over and over again. You begin to think, oh, my needs aren't valid. And you think, oh, well, I'm just going to stop speaking up, because every time I speak up for my needs, people dismiss them and tell me I'm whining or complaining or making a big deal of nothing. And so your boundaries can become really, really weak. you know?
And especially if you're going through schools with, you know, PBIS and you're doing, we won't go into the ABA conversation today, but they are basically telling you, like, you're not allowed to have boundaries. Like, you don't get to have boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And parents do that sometimes too. You know, they say, oh, you're my child, and they treat you, you know, like, oh, you're my property, which is a whole nother problem altogether. And they don't let you have any privacy sometimes, or, you know, parents can do it too. They don't even mean to do it sometimes. They think sometimes they're acting in your best interest by trying to be maybe a little overly watchful and overly controlling, because they're like, you know, I don't want them to make a mistake. And we learn from making mistakes. We need to make mistakes, you know?
Yeah.